In the depths of a frozen forest, survival often comes down to a single spark. Here is how one man built a winter refuge from the snow up. Deep in the winter woods, one woodsman sets out to construct a cold-weather camp before nightfall. The heavy canopy of an old pine offers an immediate structural advantage. Its dense upper branches act as an umbrella, catching the bulk of the snowfall before it reaches the ground. By clearing the dead, low-hanging limbs, he reclaims the dry space underneath for a shelter footprint. A hand axe is the only heavy tool he carries. In freezing temperatures, efficiency dictates every movement. Overexertion leads to sweating, and sweat in this environment can quickly become a fatal layer of ice. Removing lateral branches opens the interior volume, transforming a tangled trunk into a load-bearing central pillar. The natural layout of the forest dictates the geometry of the camp. Every cut is calculated to maximize usable space without compromising the tree's natural snow-shedding umbrella. The ground here is already shielded from the deepest drifts, giving him a head start on the foundation. Direct contact with the frozen earth drains body heat faster than the surrounding air. A thick sheepskin rug creates a critical thermal break between the woodsman and the snow. Testing the overhead clearance ensures the space can comfortably contain both his body and his gear. It marks the baseline of his living quarters. With the foundation set, the next phase requires raw timber. He harvests dead, standing wood whenever possible, as it burns cleaner and is lighter to haul. Fallen branches that have not rotted provide immediate framing material without the need to fell a live tree. Cutting them to length requires precision, balancing structural needs against the energy cost of every axe swing. A lean-to frame relies on a few solid support beams to bear the eventual weight of the insulation. Dragging a longer timber back to the site establishes the primary ridgepole. The forest offers everything required, but the labor of extraction is steep. He measures the surrounding young pines, reading the terrain for natural anchor points to reinforce his design. Weaving pine boughs into the open sides creates a preliminary windbreak. The long support beam is wedged directly against the thick trunk of the central pine. This transfers the load of the roof down into the earth through the living tree. By locking the frame into existing natural structures, the shelter gains stability against harsh winter gusts. The angle of the beam is crucial. A steeper pitch sheds falling snow more effectively, preventing thousands of pounds of wet weight from crushing the lean-to. He tests the integrity of the joints, knowing the walls must hold steady under an increasing winter load. After hours of continuous labor, the initial frame takes shape. But a skeleton of wood is not enough to trap heat. He ventures back out into the falling snow to collect the true insulation of the forest. Evergreen boughs. Dense clusters of pine needles contain thousands of tiny air pockets. When layered thickly, like shingles on a roof, they form an impenetrable barrier against wind and precipitation. He maneuvers inside the cramped interior, pushing the fresh branches into the gaps of the framework. The goal is to create a dead air space, minimizing the volume of air his body and fire will need to heat. Every additional layer of greenery dramatically increases the thermal retention of the small den. He seals the roof from the inside out, interlocking the stems to lock out the relentless draft. The space transforms from an open hollow into a fortified pocket of stillness. The fading daylight signals a crucial shift in the stakes of the day. Navigating deep snow is an exhausting process, burning through thousands of calories with every step. He makes one final push across the snowy slope to gather the last necessary reinforcements. The dark silhouette of the woodsman stands in stark contrast against the vast, freezing landscape. As the temperature drops rapidly with the setting sun, completing the physical labor becomes a race against the cold. Back at the shelter, he wedges the final boughs into the wall, completely sealing the windward side. The barrier between him and the winter night is now firmly in place. With the shelter sealed, the immediate priority shifts from wind protection to active heat. He prepares a bundle of birch bark, carefully scraping the surface to separate the paper-thin outer layers. Birch bark is rich in natural oils, making it one of the few wild materials that will ignite even when damp. Scraping it down into fine, wool-like fibers creates a maximum surface area to catch a spark. Inside the wind-free pocket of the lean-to, he readies the ferrocerium rod, Striking the rod shaves off metallic fragments that burn at several thousand degrees. The enclosed space holds an intense anticipation, as warmth is now the only barrier against hypothermia. He aims the shower of molten sparks directly into the core of the prepared fibrous mound. Out here, safety lasts only as long as the heat does. The first fragile flame catches, feeding greedily on the volatile oils of the birch bark. He acts quickly but calmly, transferring the burning core to a larger nest of dry, pencil-thin twigs. Fire building is an exercise in oxygen management. If the twigs are packed too tightly, the flame will choke. If they are too loose, the heat dissipates before it can ignite the next stage of kindling. He cups his hands around the delicate fire, shielding it from stray drafts while guiding its upward climb. As the twigs catch, the core temperature rises, allowing him to introduce thicker branches. The fire is the heart of any winter camp, and its sudden light completely alters the psychology of the shelter. It pushes back the encroaching dark and floods the cramped space with dry, radiant heat. The dense walls of pine needles now act as a reflector, catching the thermal energy and bouncing it back into the living space. He settles back, reading the flames to understand how the wood is burning and when it will need more fuel. The lean-to has transformed from a cold physical barrier into a glowing oasis of warmth. In the middle of a frozen wilderness, the simple crackle of burning wood represents total self-sufficiency. With the fire stabilized, he turns to the critical task of replenishing calories. A small leather kit holds concentrated spices, a lightweight luxury that transforms wild game into a restorative meal. He adds water from a metal canteen, utilizing the rolling heat of the fire to bring the stew to a boil. Hydration in winter is notoriously difficult to maintain, as the cold suppresses the body's natural thirst response. A hot broth delivers both necessary fluids and internal warmth. The hard labor of the day is done, and the woodsman allows his body to finally rest. He sits near the edge of the flames, absorbing the steady heat radiating through his damp clothing. The enclosed design of the shelter traps the warm air, creating a microclimate that defies the freezing woods outside. Patience takes over as the metal pot simmers. This quiet waiting period is a crucial phase of recovery, letting the muscles untense in the dry warmth. The rich, hot stew delivers a massive influx of energy, fueling the body's internal furnace for the long night ahead. In sub-zero environments, digesting heavy fats and proteins generates significant metabolic heat. He eats deliberately, savoring the comfort of a successful camp. Switching on his headlamp, he pours a hot drink into a metal cup, managing his fluid intake before sleep. The contrast is absolute. A few feet away lies lethal cold, but inside the ring of firelight there is absolute security. He retreats completely into the heavy insulation of the sleeping bag, sealing out the damp night air. The tight confines of the pine bough den restrict movement, but they excel at retaining body heat. The thermal mass of the earth beneath the sheepskin rug slowly stabilizes, buffered from the frozen wind. As the fire burns down to coals, the shelter relies entirely on its passive insulation to survive the coldest hours before dawn. He surrenders to sleep. Wrapped in layers of wool, down, and evergreen needles, the woodsman disappears into the quiet rhythm of the forest. Morning light reveals a landscape utterly unchanged by his presence. The shelter is virtually invisible, a snow-covered mound seamlessly integrated into the root system of the giant pine. He emerges into the freezing air, the success of the night evident in his steady, deliberate movements. Packing the heavy canvas bag requires a return to efficiency, leaving no trace behind in the deep drifts. The shelter now works with the forest instead of against it. Roof from the branches, walls from the earth, warmth trapped within. Instead of forcing the environment to adapt, he aligned the structure with the environment. A place of absolute quiet.